Alright, it's time. It's time, ladies and gents. Let's fucking do this shit, baby. Yes. What's going on, guys? We're back. An hour and 45 minutes later. I'm going to add this scene. I haven't actually... I'm going to try and get this to work so I get a nice little setup. I should really, in hindsight, should have done... I really should have done this before the stream, but... You know, I'm a really good streamer, so I actually didn't even think about it. Okay. How is the audio levels? How's that? I mean, we don't want to... How's that? Probably need to turn them down a bit, I guess. 3rd of July pre-patch. It's not time, it's not the WoW UI. Audio seems good, we're waiting till you hear Josh and Alan talk. I'm out of music, MrGM. Alright. Let's see if I can scoot this. To be honest, we don't need the Twitch chat. I'm gonna see if I can get rid of the chat. Aha, there it is. Now we're cooking with gas. Alright, how's that, guys? Beautiful? Looks good to me. By the way, have you chosen a Q&A bingo sheet from Wowhead? No. Audio seems good, let's wait till they talk. Hi, I'm a single player that asked, did someone say, hey guys, welcome to the stream. This is going to be a short stream. We are going to upload this afterwards. But yeah, again, let me know if the audio is okay, if we can hear me, and obviously hear the high amount of music. But yes, sponsors, if you're in the chat, we do have some new emojis. We also have new sellout icons for each month. So the first one's green, like common, then blue, like rare, and then it goes to epic, and then it goes to legendary, and then there is artifact, but that's a year, and I don't think we're getting that anytime soon. But just wondering if you're able to hear the Q&A on your stream, or are you going to talk over it? I'm not going to talk over it, no. We'll let them do their thing. Yeah, I'm not gonna... I'm not just gonna talk over them. Oh, no. It's blue now, yeah, so you can actually hover over the sellout icon and it'll tell you how many months you've sponsored. Alright, so what are we expecting, guys? What are you expecting from the Q&A? What is, Are you doing gameplay? No, this is just a Q&A. Give me Reptilian Race. Worgen new model? Dude, how fucking sweet would that be? Even if they tease like a little bit of it or something. I'll be down for that. Pre-patch release date. I think pre-patch release date sounds very, very likely. Honestly, I can actually see them doing the PTR today. They'll be like, yeah, it's gone up. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they're like, yeah, it's on the PTR now. Do you think they'll drop a bomb on us? Dude, I love that for the Q&A. Every time they say it like a allied race thing, I'm like, yeah. But no, they'll probably talk about PvP for like 3 hours. And that's about it, really. But we'll see. We'll see what happens, guys. We've got a minute to go. A minute to go. Will my question be answered? Probably not. But we'll see. How's the audio? Is that okay? Can everyone hear the high amount of music? New models would be cool. Vol'dun still alive. Dandy. I don't think they'll show no model, but it would be cool. Ooh, here we go. Let's see if your question gets answered. Dude, how fucking sick would that be? It's never happened, though. I do ask questions every time, but I don't see it happening. Dude, I can't wait for him to not pronounce names very well. Again, I know I've never done this before, so if I do end up talking too much or whatever, just let me know. Like, just say, shut up. Louder? I'm gonna turn it down in my ear. Where do they stream? Is this on their YouTube channel? Imagine the chat will go wide if your question got answered. I want to put a link to the stream.
Hello everybody and welcome to
Wow, it's quiet.
World of Warcraft live developer Q&A. My name is Josh Allen, aka Community Manager Lore, joined here once again by Game Director Ian Hazakostas.
Hey Josh, yeah, pleasure as always.
We need to turn him up.
We have a lot of really great questions picked out today. I'm super stoked for answers on a lot of them, so we're just going to jump right into it. First question.
Actually, before we do, just one, people who are paying attention may notice PTR for 8.0 is coming up literally as we speak.
Told you.
It's quite possible that, watch this, pay close attention for this for the next hour, but then right after that, if you want to, check out some of the things that we're going to talk about today, you can copy your character and see for yourself what that, 8.0 pre-expansion patch period is going to look like.
Awesome. Yeah, maybe a good time while you're watching this, go ahead and get that client downloaded as well if you don't already have it. All right. Are we good? Can I get in the questions?
I think we're good. Sorry.
Can I answer questions now? Okay,
we're good.
Great. Right,
how's the audio? Is that right?
First question of the day comes from 11 Cole on Twitter, who asked, are we getting blood trolls during the new expansion? If yes, what's going to be the Alliance counterpart?
Wait, Alliance counterpart? I thought the blood trolls were going to be the Alliance allied race. Shouldn't the question be who's going to be the Horde counterpart? Because I feel like the crazed cultists that worship the blood god Gahun feel like a natural fit.
Natural fit for the Alliance.
We should really enlist their aid. No, sorry, yes. So there was an interview at E3 earlier this week. Sorry, just getting the trolling off to see what I did there.
Getting the trolling off on the troll question.
Yes, there was an interview earlier this week at E3 where one of the members of the WoW development team misspoke, meant to refer to Zandalari trolls. As we all know, Zandalari trolls are indeed coming as a future Horde allied race later on in Battle for Azeroth, and Kul'Tiran humans will be their counterpart, and that's kind of the culmination of the core storyline. Blood trolls are bad. We're going to kill a lot of blood trolls in the months to come.
All right. So no blood trolls. Don't worry about that. Just a misunderstanding.
Yeah, it's
misspeaking there.
As we've discussed, Warcraft is not so much a world of black and white for the most part. A lot of shades of gray. Blood trolls are bad dudes.
Okay.
They're pretty black. We're going to kill them.
Got it. Next question from Rhyme, who asked, is the allied race system going to be a BFA system, or is there a good likelihood of it being expanded on in future expansions? So kind of like how the Garrison was a Warlords of Draenor system, the Artifact was a Legion system. Is our allied races just for Battle for Azeroth, or could we see more of them in the future?
Definitely could see more in the future. I think while it's a centerpiece of Battle for Azeroth and the story of, reaching out and mustering allies, gathering them together under the banner to fight this war is a core part of this expansion. I think looking ahead, it's an awesome tool that we now have to, where it makes sense for the story, bring new races into the fold and allow them to join the existing factions. I think that said, I do want to note that we're not thinking of this as something that, as we get past Battle for Azeroth, we need to check off, like, all right, what's going to be the allied race for this patch? We don't want to be going down a road where 5 years from now there are, 30 races to choose among, and we're just, kind of coming up with things not because it makes sense for the story, but because we feel like we need to add new allied races.
Right.
But that said, it's likely we're going to come across awesome new allies, and it will make perfect sense to have them join.
Cool.
That's my question.
Next question comes from Sicarius, who's asking, are we going to see a similar patch cycle for BFA like we did in Legion?
That is pretty much the plan, yes. I think we'll have a lot more to talk about when it comes to details of our patches, but the overall philosophy that we laid out a couple of years ago, BlizzCon 2016, I think played out as we hoped it would, and we've heard a lot of great feedback from everyone throughout the course of Legion. The sort of tick-tock structure of alternating large content patches that take us to new places in the world and advance the story, with smaller .5 patches that add more evergreen features like expanded time walking and micro holidays and whatnot. And something always feeling like it's around the corner. I think that's something that is a great fit for World of Warcraft.
It's got to be one time.
We are very happy and excited to continue doing it.
Yeah, and it's possibly worth noting as well that a lot of our content release schedule nowadays is more focused around when is the right time for this to come out and less around exactly when the patch is, like we've seen with raids and such, where the patch will come out that has the data for the raid in it, but everyone's like, you just released a raid like 2 weeks ago, could you hold off for a bit? So
whereas
we'll come out with a patch and then we'll wait and open it when it makes sense.
Exactly. Whereas people may be very much ready for a new Outdoor Worlds zone to explore and adventure in because they've been doing the same stuff for months. We can, release individual pieces of content as it makes sense. It's something we'll continue to do.
Cool. Sounds good. Makes sense. Next question from Dude Joey, who asked, can you talk about how flying will be handled in BFA? And most specifically, will we have to level both Alliance and Horde characters to earn it. So I know a lot of people have been looking at data mining and trying to figure out how to unlock flying on the beta. Obviously, it's not something you can really do at the moment. What's going on there?
Flying cannot be unlocked in patch 8.0. That'll be something that comes further on down the road in Battle for Azeroth. Really, we're looking to handle this exactly the same way it was in Legion. There were some display issues with the Pathfinder Part 1 achievement that people noticed, where it seemed to be requiring both Kul'Tiran and Zandalari Diplomat, or completing both war campaigns. That's a display bug. It should be fixed in the next beta build that goes out next week. The intent is basically it's one or the other for those subparts. So it's explore both subcontinents, get your appropriate factions' reputations all the way up, complete your faction's war campaign, your faction's main story, outer world storylines, do 100 different world quests. Like, it's the same sort of things that Legion Pathfinder involved, and you only have to play one faction to do it.
Okay. Perfect. I know a lot of people have been wondering about that.
Should probably rotate
good to get that
CMs,
clarification out there.
Just give everyone a go.
Question here on a similar line from Isaris, who asked, are you planning on keeping the Pathfinder achievements to allow flight in old zones? Warlords of Draenor was 2 expansions ago, and it's no longer current content, so it wouldn't hurt removing it for new or returning players after a couple expansions.
That's going to be a
We've gotten a lot of questions about this over the last several months now, actually. People asking, are we going to keep the requirement to earn Pathfinder for older expansions as time goes on?
We don't have any current plans to change it. It's something that we definitely hear this feedback, and something we discuss internally occasionally. I think obviously there's natural convenience arguments. The content doesn't feel as relevant anymore. It's something you're leveling through, and of course it's faster and easier to be able to fly. That said, we're a little wary of undercutting or devaluing the effort that goes into earning Pathfinder in the first place, and creating a sense that, well, maybe don't even bother doing this. It'll just end up being given to us for free if we wait a little bit down the line. So that's something that we want the time spent earning those reputations and completing those requirements to mean something. And that said, like leveling through
pre-patch
is
coming
something that
up.
was designed to be done on the ground anyway.
On the PTO.
It was done in the first instance.
Yeah.
We don't feel like anyone's missing out there. And we are very mindful. We're not generally having modern content sending you back to those areas for long stretches of time. Now, if the reason why you want it is to aid collecting or pet battling or other things that you're doing there, it's still something that you can work towards and recognize that account-wide benefit in a way that still makes sense relative to the effort involved.
Okay, and there's also that mount that you get out of out of the Draenor Pathfinder.
They should just make it a bit easier, I think.
Definitely still benefits to going back and doing it. Question here from I'm Vapor, who said, can we get a rough timeline for specs that are still on the radar for major changes prior to pre-patch? So, a couple of points here. At this point, I would say the window for major changes is pretty rapidly closing in terms of sort of the level of rework that we've seen. Obviously, not even approaching, let's say, Demonology Warlock or whatnot, way back in beta, but even the more recent changes to, let's say, Fury Warrior or Balance Druid. We're still listening to feedback. There's still plenty of room to make tweaks to individual talents, to certain interactions. For example, I think Tiger's Fury's back off the GCD for Feral in the next beta build that's going out. Yep. Deadly Calm as well.
Yeah, exactly. Recognize, okay, this thing is really just enabling your next button press. It's not really the same sort of damage cooldown as Recklessness and Arcane Power and the rest. Maybe it doesn't need the same treatment. Those sorts of changes are still happening. The reason here is, and that's just to be clear, we're not saying we think all of our specs are perfect, which is why we're not changing anything, because we know they're not. It's an ongoing process. It's a process that's going to continue after Battle for Azeroth launches, and the discussion remains valuable. The challenge is time is running out, and making major changes is not something that it's not something we ever really get right on the first try, right? We're not just going to pull apart and reassemble a rotation and have it just work. And so it's an iterative process that requires, at the very least, multiple weeks to play out, and we're getting to the point where we don't want to make a large change that might end up making things worse without enough time to really react to that feedback and get things really fixed up before the game ships. And in the meantime, we also have to move on to basic balance and tuning. So to the extent that people's concerns are just I feel really weak on beta right now, or whenever I join a dungeon group, it feels like I'm at the bottom of meters. Like, that's the stuff that the team as a whole is shifting their focus to now, in conjunction with all the different Azeroth powers, to make sure that, you know, spec balance around tanks, healers, and DPS is competitive as we move into launch. Discussion of, you know, the feel of rotation, pacing of rotations,
what mustard,
complexity,
I think he's just trolling
lack
us,
of complexity,
not very funny.
awkwardness of button interactions. All of those things are still ongoing and
14 gig
useful,
BTR,
but we're going to start to
Jesus.
soon target 8.1, our first major patch, for where those changes might land, because we need the time to iterate on them further and get them right. And, you know, some specs I know that we've been talking about recently, based on a lot of forum feedback, Enhancement Shaman, Shadow Priest, Elemental Shaman to an extent, and there may be room to make some changes, sort of more targeted and surgically, but in terms of broad sweeping changes, that's going to have to wait for a patch. And I realize that's frustrating for, you know, players of those specs who wish they were in a better state from their perspective, but ultimately, you know, stability and balance and making sure that Battle for Azeroth goes out in, you know, a good overall state precludes us continuing to tinker significantly with those specs at this stage.
Yeah, a couple other things that I would mention as well. So one important thing to understand about how class balance works in World of Warcraft in 2018 is that, like you say, it is an ongoing process. The thing that we've learned over the years from, like, a patch comes out and there's a raid, and then people get into the raid and it's like all of a sudden, wait, hang on, things are a little bit weird for this spec.
Date on the pre-patch,
we just kind of have to constantly
just come on the
keep
PTR
tweaking
so you
things
can try it out now.
just seeing how players are reacting to things. Sometimes players come up with ways to play specs that we were completely not expecting. So we always have to be able to
not the actual PTR.
We just kind of have to make it an ongoing process.
Servers.
The other thing I would say is that while we're saying there's not really any plans for, like, major overhauls or anything in the time leading up to pre-patch at this
still
point,
talking about specs.
Sometimes we still have the balance and tuning to do, and sometimes balance and tuning can then end up feeling like a major change when it's something like like we looked at this one talent and found out that it was just doing a third of the damage that it's supposed to be. So then we buffed up this talent, and now that completely changes your rotation, because now you take this talent and it has an impactful effect on how you play your class. So it's tough to say no major changes, because major changes can still happen as a result of balance and tuning.
Very true. And I can guarantee there will be changes that are made that some people will consider major.
Yes.
But I guess my definition of that, as I'm reading this question, is the sort of significant rotational overhaul that, let's say, Moonkin saw a couple of weeks ago. That's not something that we're likely to see come down the pipe at this stage.
Yeah, we're not likely to be adding more spells or completely reworking how a spell even functions. It's going to be, like, mostly numerical from here on.
That's right. Cool.
All right, it's done.
Moving on. Next question comes from Eric King Gaming, who asked, any more updates about class buffs? So many classes do not have their class buffs, and we're very close to launch. Many were active during BlizzCon, which was great to see. It's not going to feel good to only have a few classes having buffs while others do not. So obviously referring to things like Power Word Fortitude. I think in the BlizzCon build we had Mark of the Wild.
That's right.
What's going on there?
So I think, yeah, but players saw it last fall.
BlizzCon
was
sub to play on the PTR.
An experiment that we've pulled back from in some areas, out of concern that, so what we're trying to accomplish here is balancing the non-throughput things that classes and specs bring to a group. Beyond just the damage that you do, the healing that you do, what's the reason why you're happy to see, oh sweet, we have a druid in this group, or we have a mage in this group, or if you're a pug leader trying to put together a raid, and you already have 2 of one class but none of another, what's the thing that makes you actively look for, you know, yeah, let's get a warlock in here, let's get a demon hunter in here, specifically because we lack one. We want to make sure that there are reasons for all the classes to feel special. And I think in some ways it's overly simplistic to just say, okay, the reason is everyone brings some passive throughput buff, and that was the world that we used to live in some years back, a couple of expansions ago, with a sort of buff matrix, and you'd have that little UI element that ticked off the ones that you had versus were missing, and it just felt like a very straightforward solution to a puzzle. No one really feels special there. No one really feels meaningfully different. It's just like, okay, yeah, I bring crit, you bring int, she brings, you know, primary stat, whatever. So instead, we looked at the overall package of utility.
I thought Mark of the Wild was coming back.
What classes are bringing that makes them special, different from others, and where it made sense to bolster that package by bringing back some classic buffs like Prayer of Fortitude. That felt like a really great fit. There is something cool about just having that moment of, all right, let's get the couple of buffs on the raid before we pull. It's a little bit of ceremony to it. Doesn't need to be 10. Mark of the Wild, in the case of druids have pretty great utility.
I don't know why they're going back on buffs.
Always feel like they
just
use
doesn't
more,
really make any sense.
More,
really.
Sure.
But between
Battle
Res, Innervate from Moonkin, and many other things, the talents they can opt into in terms of control, people are happy to see druids in their group. No one is ever wondering, like, oh, why would I ever want to bring a druid to this dungeon group? And so adding Mark of the Wild on top of that felt gratuitous to some extent. It's not to say that it could never return, but we didn't want to do it just to satisfy some formulaic requirement. It was more a question of what was needed where, and that's where these buffs and debuffs came from.
Cool. Makes sense. Moving on, next question from Azamane, who says, will classes play like they are on beta during the BFA pre-patch, or will there be some temporary adjustments to compensate for things that might not play as well before getting to 120 and having Azerite gear, etc.?
Oh yeah, I was going to put it in the...
our focus for balance and tuning is the post-BFA world. We are taking steps to make sure nothing feels overly broken, that people aren't going back and finding content that they used to do more challenging or impossible. We want you, if you're used to farming in Taurus, you should go back and farm in Taurus during the 8.0 pre-expansion period. Your set bonuses will still work just fine. You'll still have your legendaries; those will work just fine. Like, you'll basically have everything functioning except for
I got it back
the
in the
artifact
description. I completely forgot about that.
Which are deactivated once you move into 8.0. But we are retuning the game around that missing power.
Right.
And beyond that, there will be some differences in rotations, but it should still be a functional state.
Yeah, straight back orcs.
And like Ian said earlier, there's still a lot of numerical tuning that needs to happen. So if you're looking at the beta right now, or with the PTR coming up, you're looking at the PTR right away and going, wait, hang on, I don't do nearly as much damage now that I've lost my artifact traits. That's likely something that will resolve.
Exactly. And actually, to be especially clear on PTR, if people are copying in the next day or two and going to solo old raids or go run a dungeon with some friends to see how things are different, those numbers are actually farther off from the intended final result than
Steve
the
M.
Battle for Azeroth content.
Man.
I think over the course of beta, we've really been focusing on the 111 to 120 tuning because that's what we've been testing and iterating on. Now, as we shift to numerical balancing,
they're still making changes.
Obviously, we're going to pay very close attention to existing balance at 110 and making sure that it's not a disruptive transition for players. But we haven't quite gotten there yet. So, like, the values that you're seeing are roughed in. But don't freak out if something seems way harder than it used to. That is not the intent.
Yeah. Do give us the feedback if something seems out of whack. But
just a sub
bear in mind that we just haven't gotten around to fixing it yet. Next question from Anast Soon, who says, are we going to see the new systems, talents, and stat squish early at pre-patch release? And any info if it's going to release soon.
We are going to have that stuff in this.
Like we said, it's in the process of coming up if it's not up already. And you'll be able to get in there and see what all the new systems and everything are on there. But do you want to talk us through some of the stuff that's coming in pre-patch, not necessarily at launch?
So I mean, really, for those who haven't been through a pre-patch cycle with us before, the Battle for Azeroth pre-expansion patch 8.0 pretty much contains all of the systems updates, class changes, talent changes, new systems and features like communities or the revamps to professions. All those are going to be in there right away from day one. The only things that you won't be able to access are content and systems that are specific to Battle for Azeroth. So obviously going to Kul'Tiras or Zandalar or islands or warfronts or the Heart of Azeroth and Azerite armor, all of those are available content after level 110 in the new lands, but everything else will be there right away. And so eager to hear your feedback from all of it, and that's includes both PTR today and that pre-patch period. And in terms of release date,
I'm gonna make a community.
Obviously, you can probably start to hazard a guess, given that we are a couple of months away from the expansion launch itself, and that PTR just went up. An exact date will be announced closer to the actual pre-patch event, based on testing and stabilizing, bug fixing, all the process that we have left ahead of us in the coming weeks.
Cool. Yeah, we really do wait until we know that we have a product ready to go out before announcing these release dates. So it's going to depend entirely on if you can help us out with testing on the PTR, that will help quite a bit.
Yep.
think
Similar
we still
question
need
here
to do a
from
load of
Chris
stuff,
Allman,
that's
and actually
probably why.
it's kind of
Yeah.
narrowing down on that last question
Yeah.
a bit, but I still think it's worth going over.
No, totally.
Will War Mode be available
Yes.
in the Battle for Azeroth pre-patch?
I
So
think.
War Mode being the
I'm
sort
gonna
of
say
new
yes.
approach to the concept of a PvP server, where rather than at server select deciding whether or not you want open world PvP, you get to just decide when you go out into the world,
Yes.
do I want open world PvP?
Actually, this is great question. Actually, I completely forgot this when listing the other systems. Yes, the PvP system changes are there right away in the 8.0 pre-patch as well. So that includes the new honor talent system, where you're picking 3 active talents from a large pool,
So it's
rather
basically
than
like the
being
beta without the
constrained to
spoilers.
individual road selections.
It's pretty cool.
And then War Mode itself, where you can, if your Horde, go to Orgrimmar, if your Alliance, go to Stormwind, and through your talent UI, opt into War Mode. When you venture out into the world, you will be on, in a version of the world with other players who've made that same decision, and it's a foundation upon which we can build exciting new world PvP. We are looking to have a couple of
Don't know when
War
the
Mode
pre-patch
specific
is.
events, some of our pre-patch content that we'll see down the line, so we can start exercising the potential of that system.
It's on the PTR.
And if you're leveling, but if you're still not 110 and you're leveling, you'll get that experience bonus from being in War Mode. Or if you're doing world quests at max level, you'll get a bit of extra gold or other rewards accordingly. And that's, as a reminder, that's there to offset the inherent loss of efficiency from having PvP active. Even if you're winning all your fights, the fact that you're occasionally getting into these skirmishes is inherently going to slow you down. The goal with the tuning, and we might continue to adjust it based on the rates that we're seeing on live, is to make it so that people who love world PvP feel confident in playing that way. They don't feel like they're sacrificing or punishing themselves and hurting their own efficiency significantly by turning that on and playing in War Mode. But we also don't want the rewards to be so lucrative that people who dislike world PvP feel pressured or punished for not preferring that gameplay.
Cool. We have another War Mode question here. Next one, actually, from Nampi. And I know we've talked about this one a bit, but it does seem to be a point of confusion, so we'll go ahead and clarify here. Question is, there seems to be a lot of confusion about War Mode on RP and RP PvP realms.
Good question.
Will we be sharded only with players from our own realm who have War Mode turned on or off, or will things stay the same?
In the sense, role-playing realms now, part of the role-playing rule set is, except in cases of extreme server load, like expansion launch or the running of the gnomes and similar events, our RP servers only see by default people from their own server. You can form cross-server groups willingly, but we're not going to split
PvP
or
stuff looks
coalesce
so much fun.
multiple
It really
versions of the
does.
same zone between servers. That's part of the role-play rule set, because RP communities are more tight-knit. That's something that we've heard repeatedly from those communities. For War Mode, this is just going to work along those same lines. If you are in an RP server and you turn on War Mode, you will see players from your server out in the world, specifically. And again, if someone joins a group cross-server, you'll see some folks coming in that way. But by default, let's say hypothetically you're an Emerald Dream. When you're walking around in War Mode, you're going to see Emerald Dream names all around you, and anyone else that you see from a different server was invited there by someone on your server to join them. And in terms of realm classifications, in 8.0, there's really only 2 realm types now. There's normal and role-playing, because we don't need this separate PvP classification, because no matter what server type you play on, you have equal access to world PvP gameplay, and server type isn't a boundary anymore.
Right. Cool. Just moving on. Next question here from Faith, who's asking, are the cross-realm restrictions on Mythic raids still going forward? So asking basically, just to rephrase, I guess.
think they're going to say they'll open
are we
it
considering
after
removing
the raid's been out for a while?
the requirement that Mythic raids be all on the same server, at least initially?
So, yes, but. So, I think there's a lot of value
pre-patch is on
in
PTR now,
preserving what remains of server identity and guild identity, and the high-end Mythic progression competitive race occurring between guilds that are based on specific servers in regions throughout the world. That said, we've seen, and with the increasing rise of cross-server raiding, there are many heroic raid groups that are very successful that maybe spend the first couple of months of a tier working through the raid on heroic, and they might have 20 or more members of their cross-server group, but then as soon as they finish the last boss, they kind of hit a wall where they can't continue into Mythic because they don't have enough people on any one server. Traditionally, we haven't unlocked this until the next tier comes out. We'd like to look at backing off that a bit. We think that's a bit too restrictive, a bit too harsh, given where most of the player base is at these days. So we're planning to try something a little bit different in Battle for Azeroth. Some close observers may have noticed there's a couple of new achievements that have popped up under Guild Feats of Strength.
Yeah,
they are called Hall of Fame.
I don't think it'll be active straight away, though.
There's Hall of Fame Gahun for both the Alliance and for the Horde. And these achievements are awarded to the top 100 guilds of each faction in the world to kill the final boss of Uldir on Mythic difficulty. And our plan currently is to actually have a sort of web archive where those leaderboards are maintained for posterity, and we'll just rank the guilds in order of timestamp of their kills on the Alliance side and on the Horde side. Once 100 guilds on a given faction have killed the boss, the achievement will still be available for the rest of that raid reset. We don't want to penalize people who happen to raid on a Monday versus a Saturday or whatever. But after that, okay, Horde leaderboard is full. Horde Hall of Fame achievement no longer available. Once both Horde and Alliance leaderboards are full, so once 100 Alliance guilds and 100 Horde guilds have defeated Mythic Gahun, we will open up cross-server Mythic raiding for Uldir. And
awesome.
So that is the plan going forward. Let the worldwide competitive race unfold, and then once that's concluded, that next tier of raiders, many of whom are cross-server groups, can enjoy the benefits of cross-server raiding.
That's awesome. So it's kind of like, okay, yeah, the world first race is pretty much over at this point. Now it's safe for us to open it up to...
nothing about the Prestige
that's
yet.
really cool.
They haven't spoken about PvP. Probably next.
Moving on, next question from Requiem, who said, will the artifact be disabled after the retirement quest, or will it automatically be disabled like on beta? Doesn't make any sense story-wise for a new artifact to be sacrificed for something the character has not yet encountered.
So, yes. So the artifact traits will be disabled in 8.0. If you copy your character to the PTR right now, you will see the artifact is a powerful weapon that has relics in it that increases item level, but the traits are inactive and will remain so. And this is, it's for both mechanical and story reasons, as part of the squish, as part of retiring the artifact and replacing it. It would not be actually really possible to ever replace that weapon with any sort of conceivable eye level if all the traits remained active. It's just that much power. Story-wise, there's always a mix of players' personal actions and just events that happen and advance the world around you. Even if you haven't personally completed Antorus,
nothing on Classic.
Battle for Azeroth in the 8.0 pre-patch, if you go to Silithus, you're going to see his giant sword sticking out of the earth. Even though you personally didn't contribute to the series of events that made that happen, it has now happened in the world as a whole. Similarly, due to events that have yet to unfold, the power of the artifacts will concentrate itself and then wane, and that's something that's going to affect everybody, whether they've done the quests involved or not.
Okay. Next question from De Griffins. On a similar note, when we retire our artifact weapons, will we just lose the artifact? Will we just lose the artifact power and abilities, or will they also lose the relics that gave them their boost in item level?
Literally just said that.
So yeah, this was just touched on. Relics still exist. Relics increase item level. That will be how it works for leveling players. You'll get your Ashbringer, and as you level up or do any quests or dungeons or raids along the way, you socket in 3 relics to increase its total item level, and its power is the product of those 3 relics item levels.
Yeah. And they obviously, because the traits have been retired, the relics won't be adding to any traits or anything like that. It's just going to be cool.
Yep.
Next question from, I'm going to say Drake the 90 or Draketh 90, not sure. Can you please reconsider locking artifact skins behind specialization restrictions?
This is going to be a good one.
Made sense when we were actually using the weapons, but once BFA hits, a class restriction would be more than enough to keep the fantasy intact. So kind of coming from the notion of, if I play a mage, I'd like to be able to have the skin of the Frost Staff.
I bet he's going to say,
or I'd like to be able to have Alaneth on my Frost Mage and stuff like that.
So our artifact transmog is a bit of a special case. So on the one hand, yes, there are very strong fantasy connections between specific specializations and the weapons themselves.
Here we go.
And when you see somebody with Ashbringer, when you see somebody with dragon-headed flail and a shield, that should immediately indicate what specialization they are. But the flip side of this is actually we're breaking some other rules here to make sure that you can always transmog, or in general, that when there are artifact appearances that occupy both of your hands, and especially in unusual ways, you can transmog them over basically anything, even breaking the regular rules. So some notable examples. If you're a Holy Paladin wondering, well, wait, how am I ever going to use this artifact transmog going forward? Because am I really going to have a spell two-hander? Like I usually use a one-hander in shield. We will let you transmog your two-hand artifact appearance over a one-hand in shield.
That's pretty cool.
Similarly, obviously, in the case of druids, who feral druids you can't dual wield daggers normally. That's not a standard thing you can do.
Yeah.
Don't worry, you'll be able to transmog that over whatever and get your animal appearances. Or a fire mage who happens to get a great staff in a raid can still use the one-hand and off-hand combo from their artifact that they've grown accustomed to.
I actually kind of like that.
And so mixing that with removing spec restrictions would lead to a lot of potentially very odd outcomes in terms of animation sets and abilities you're using with weapons that you were never really intended to be able to use. We could have explored some more complex version of the design that overrides those restrictions only for some specs but not others. But we opted not to go down that road just in the interest of a straightforward system. And
well, I think it's cool to say, like, looking at Legion and looking how impactful the artifact has been over the course of Legion, I think it's cool to say artifacts are special. Artifacts kind of break the rules a little bit. They kind of have their own separate little thing going on in terms of transmog and stuff going forward. I think that makes a lot of sense. That's pretty cool.
And I think, and we're also looking at just preserving the status quo that players have grown accustomed to over the last couple of years. Right? If you are a fire mage, you might want to use your Frost Staff or to use Alaneth while still being fire spec because you like its look, but that's not something you've ever been able to do. And so we're just preserving kind of the way the rules have played out over the last couple of years.
So I guess TLDR on that. Yes, it will remain spec specific, but you will be able to transmog it over whatever you happen to have equipped as that spec. Cool. Next question here from JFunk Gaming, who asked, "You can't switch any gear while in Mythic Plus right now in BFA.
He's going to say,
is this intended or a bug?" Obviously referring to testing on the beta.
I think it's
so.
Intended.
Yes, players have noticed this in the last few days. This is intended. So it's really interesting seeing the discussion unfold around this change. So this is consistent with our philosophy on changing spec or talents, or more recently, the 735 dungeon-wide battle res limit. In a lot of ways, if you think about gear switching, plenty of people would love to, if it were possible, change gear sets or otherwise recustomize their character in the middle of a multi-stage raid boss, right? Between Phase 3 and Phase 4, you probably want a different loadout for the adds-heavy phase than you do for the final burn phase. But as you're approaching the encounter, you have to pick a single loadout that's going to balance the needs and demands of the encounter as a whole. When it comes to dungeons, we view the entirety of the dungeon as the encounter that you're undertaking. It's longer than a raid encounter for sure, but that's actually where the variety unfolds and the different situations that we place players in kind of come together to create a balanced challenge. So when you start that timer, you are signing up for a mix of some bosses that may have intense burn phases or require group-wide healing, or trash packs that need crowd control in certain areas, or powerful defensive cooldowns, and so forth. And with the way decision-making in our game works, many of our options, whether they're talents, whether they're trinkets, whether they are Azerite powers, are a bit situational by design. There are some that are clearly better for burst AoE versus sustained single target, or defense versus mobility, or crowd control versus your own, survival. And in a specific situation, I think there's very often just a clear right answer. I'm fighting 2 packs of 5 mobs each. I just need burst AoE, and if I can talent into any AoE stuns, I want to do that. Those correct answers are very straightforward. Whereas, and again, if you're fighting a patchwork-like boss, the best answers are also straightforward. Now, there's more interesting and nuanced decision-making when you're balancing those two against each other and choosing, well, do I want to be better at this part of the dungeon at the expense of being worse at that part of the dungeon? Because overall, what's the greatest point of failure? What's stressing our group? These are decisions that we have been accustomed to making when it comes to how we spec for quite some time. And so extending it to gear, I think, makes sense in that regard. There's also some mechanical issues where in practice, gear swapping is often accomplished by, you have macros and loadouts, or using add-ons to swap between them quickly on the fly, because otherwise it'd be very cumbersome to do so. That's not a great thing to have as part of the default competitive experience here. And to be clear, the vast majority of players at most levels of Mythic Plus, including pretty high ones, aren't actually swapping gear sets on a regular basis. Yes, I realize that if you're pushing, 25s and up on live right now, it's hard to imagine not being able to swap in your Pride as or defensive setup for specific situations, or your Agrimar trinket to survive some crazy burst without, you know, having to lock that in for the whole dungeon. But as with all these changes, the game as a whole will be balanced around this landscape.
Sure.
If we find that by removing this, the overall difficulty or success rates of the dungeons are going down, we'll make difficulty adjustments to compensate. The intent here isn't to make it harder. It's more to have it, you know, be a single cohesive experience, single cohesive encounter. Look at your group, look at your composition, plan out
What
your
if you
strategy,
accidentally put a
pick your
bit of gear
loadout,
on, though?
start the timer, and go.
What about that?
Yeah, and looking forward to Battle for Azeroth also, I think, just to sort of expand on what you're saying here, I think there could easily become a point where it becomes widespread that if you are these certain specs or whatever, the quote-unquote right thing to do is wear this set of Azerite armor for clearing trash, then when you get to a boss, switch to this set of Azerite armor. And that could really end up being very, like, it sounds weird to say, that could end up being really bad for those specs in terms of getting people to actually invite them to groups if it just becomes like, well, I don't want to invite the rogue because then we're going to have to stop before every boss fight. Like, I know as a tank, I tend to just chain everything together.
I mean, it's that, or it's actually just the burden on what you have to do to be competitive. It's, in a lot of ways, if you're switching between one armor loadout and another that has, you know, 3 of one trait to 3 of another, that's very much like respecking or retalenting in some ways. And now, if you're trying to be competitive, you also probably feel like you need both of those complete loadouts at a high item level. You need to actively pursue multiple gear sets in a way that probably distorts the overall balance of the system that's designed for more mixing and matching and creating an overall well-rounded setup that suits your gameplay style. You'll still have some backup pieces, but again, you're making the decision at the start of the dungeon, what matters most to me right now? Do I need a defensive
change your gear, then come back in?
I want things that are
going to
boost my cooldowns or my execute range down.
Yeah, we got a lot of viewers. What's up, guys?
You know, to use a Legion example, this is a high tyrannical, Wrath of Ashara or whatever, and that's actually going to be a big factor in terms of shaving time at the end. I know that's going to come, so I'm going to use an execute loadout for this dungeon. That kind of thing is a decision to be making at the start, rather than the sort of no-brainer. Okay, we're getting to Wrath of Ashara. I'm going to push my execute gear set macro and swap that in.
Yeah, making the choices interesting by making less choices is actually a thing. So let's move on to the next question. It comes from Nidorina, who asked, this is actually perfectly timed. When will we learn more about the new BFA Mythic Plus affixes, and will there be testing for those affixes?
So when will you learn more? Right now. When is there testing? Right now. So we're actually we're actually not doing a significant amount of overhaul to the affixes that we have in place in Legion. I think we're having to tweak a couple of them. I think we just actually nerfed Necrotic from 3% to 2% to reflect some changes in overall tank survivability. And we'll make some other tweaks, but we're pretty happy with the variety of how they've played out over the course of Legion, and not looking to really enact change just for the sake of change and throw out a bunch of stuff that's working well and have to, just change up everything else. We have a whole new set of dungeons we're going to be exploring after all.
Right.
That's more than enough.
Sharia, actually, that's where I'm thinking most of the views are from.
We are making just a couple, really. So first off, as people on beta will have noticed by now, Tyrannical and Fortified are actually available right away from a level 2 key on up. They're actually the baseline change. The difference between Mythic 0, or just baseline Mythic, and the first level of Mythic Keystone is the presence of either Tyrannical or Fortified and nothing else. So you'll either have tougher bosses or tougher trash. One of the big things this does is get rid of that really artificial spike in difficulty and breakpoint going from 9 to 10 that just felt disproportionate in terms of the rewards. Early on in Legion, before people nowadays people are over that hump
in July,
and often dealing with 15s and up. But early on in Legion, you'd have groups that could cruise through a 9 and then just wipe for 45 minutes to some boss on Tyrannical 10.
Yeah,
and that felt wrong.
I remember getting through right after launch, getting through a Halls of Valor, getting up to the end on an 8 key and being like, all right, now we have to wait because if we 2-chess this, I'm going to be mad.
Yep. And so that's one change. So what's happening at Mythic 10? And so this is on beta right now. We're looking forward to the first groups being able to sort of push ahead and get their keys up to that level as they learn the dungeons, and we're making some tweaks to tuning to make that more accomplishable. There is a new affix, and this is what we're calling a seasonal affix. So we have Mythic, this is Battle for Azeroth Season 1 for PvP, for the raid in a sense. Vol'dun is the raid, and for Mythic Dungeons.
Some G'huun one?
And the affix for Season 1 is actually themed after our friendly blood god, G'huun, the final boss of Vol'dun. His forces and his influence and corruption are spreading throughout Azeroth, and so the level 10 affix is called Infested. And this will be present every week. It's not something that rotates, so the way in which it plays out may change from week to week. And when Infested is active, there is basically a parasite of G'huun that will have infested a certain number of the non-boss units throughout the dungeon. This parasite empowers those units, making them more dangerous, resistant to crowd control, and when they're killed or sufficiently damaged, the parasite will jump out and make its way towards another unit, at which point it can be killed before it gets there. It can be crowd controlled, stunned, locked down. It adds an extra layer of tactical planning to how you approach polls. Something that might have ordinarily been a low priority target can quickly become the #1 priority target in the poll, and that will change from week to week. The way this works, these are fixed. They're fixed. Like, loadouts isn't the right word, but patterns in terms of how the affix applies. It's not completely random. We wanted to make sure that you don't have just the unlucky roll where really rough pairs of mobs both get infested. So it's all hand chosen by us, cycling through a set of options. Sometimes there'll be some beefier lieutenant mobs that tend to be infested. Other times it'll be smaller, fodder. But the way it plays out will vary there. And so the thought is that is the Season 1 Mythic Keystone affix. Once in a later patch, once another raid tier comes out, Infested will be retired, and we will have a new themed affix for that next season. This is something, that's there for those who are pushing the higher end of keys to contend with, and for people just sort of in the mainstream of the system doing lower keys and getting loot there won't be too much that has changed meaningfully other than the presence of Tyrannical and Fortified from earlier on. And yeah, we're really excited to see how all this plays out and to have a more structured approach to something that was...
Sounds good.
It was an experiment in Legion, and I think we, looking back, feel like it was a very successful experiment, and so now we're trying to enshrine it as
60 days before launch.
Of World of Warcraft Endgame.
The patch should be going live 60 days before launch.
Alongside PvP and raiding.
Really?
That's pretty... And that also means that, Mythic Plus sort of changes as time goes on. The actual experience of going through the higher keys will change as time goes on, whereas previously doing Mob Souls #1 versus Mob Souls Mob Souls 10 plus #1 versus Mob Souls 10 plus number 288, there wasn't really any particular difference.
Exactly. And I think we made a couple of changes over the course of Legion to, I think the first couple of bosses of Mob Souls were generally pretty weak, so we made them a bit tougher.
Sure.
We changed the teaming patrols a little bit, but other than that, those were just hand tweaks. Day 1 experience was pretty similar to the day 500 experience. And like you said, we didn't get away from
July
that.
10th.
Cool.
All the week before.
Awesome. Moving on. Next question from Anetta, who asked, how competitive is gear from Mythic Keystones intended to be compared to raids? And will Azerite effects scale up when it drops in higher keystone levels?
Nothing about
Yeah, I think same as Legion in this regard. I think we're happy with how that structure has played out. Generally, at the very high end, Mythic 10 will yield the best possible loot once everything is fully unlocked a month or so into Battle for Azeroth. And that means that you'll be getting heroic Uldir quality items from the chests at the end of those runs, and a mythic Uldir quality item on a weekly basis from your weekly chest. I think, and that's that structure of roughly being parallel to the best raid gear available has felt like it worked out. We don't see
raiding without raiding.
Cool. And so the part about the Azerite effects scaling up when it drops in higher keystone levels.
So the power of Azerite effects is proportional to the item level of the item that contains them, and so Azerite armor drops separated by tiers. It can't Warforge or Titanforge, and so I'm trying to remember the exact numbers off the top of my head right now. Correct me if I'm probably wrong on this, but it's like 350, 365, 380 are the item levels I think for normal heroic mythic, and so those.
Remember, there's a squish, by the way.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. No, they're actually like Wrath of the Lich King level items. They're kind of weak, but you should use them anyway. But anyway, yeah. So those are the breakpoints. We didn't want to create 5 eye-level Azerite armor upgrades because, as much as possible, this is something we've been trying to do across itemization in Battle for Azeroth. We want a large full tier jump in item level to be a guide to say, hey, you should just equip this item, rather than having to compare a whole matrix of 3 sets of powers versus 3 others to decide and simulate and look up whether it's worth a 5 eye level loss or gain.
Right.
With 15 or more, it's much clearer. But anyway, so yes, Mythic Keystone
Kingdom Kid,
dungeon rewards do scale the whole way up with 5 eye-level increments. Azerite armor is an exception from that. There'll be certain breakpoints. I think we're currently thinking at around Mythic 4, Mythic 7, Mythic 10, where those new affixes come into play. That's where you'll start to see normal, heroic, and Mythic raid quality Azerite armor come from your weekly chest. One note, actually, for how Azerite armor is obtained at endgame. Once you get past blue quality pieces that come from normal and heroic dungeons, all the endgame sources of Azerite armor are from sources that are gated by some lockout, and not just endlessly spammable. So raids, by definition, you can only kill a raid boss once a week. In PvP, it'll come from Conquest rewards or from your weekly chest there, and from Mythic Plus, it'll come from your weekly chest. And we are planning on being significantly more generous than we are with regular items when it comes to these, but it also this allows for much greater certainty and stability in the rate at which these items can be awarded, to make sure that the average active player is getting all the ones that they need, without creating a loophole where, okay, if you just spam Mythic Plus for 50 hours a week, you can get all the Azerite armor with every power for every slot,
PvP weekly
and that's
chest,
not the way to play the game. We just want to encourage, just the best way to play, to be
PvP,
a healthy variety and diversity of the activities that you pursue, and no feeling of obligation to just grind your face off.
That would be awesome,
in pursuit of a specific reward.
Really awesome.
Cool. Moving on, next question from Fumi2407, who asked, on launch, how are Mythic Dungeons going to work? I believe in Legion that the first 3 weeks were locked to 845 item levels. So actually asking about base Mythic Dungeons, not necessarily Mythic Plus.
Yes, so I think exactly the same as, or very, very similar to how Legion worked out. The plan is we have this 3-week kind of pre-season period where everyone gets leveled up, everyone gets geared up. Baseline Mythic Dungeons are available. I believe they drop 340 eye-level gear in this new world. There will be a lower ceiling on how high items can Warforge or Titanforge. You can't, no matter how lucky you are, get some Mythic raid quality Titanforged item before the raids have even opened. And then after those 3 weeks, the PvP season begins, rated PvP begins, Uldir opens, and Mythic Keystones become available. Within that framework, still, there'll still be a lower cap on the quality of Mythic Keystone rewards, because Mythic Raid isn't open yet. We want to keep those 2 systems in parallel, just like we did in Legion. And then 1 week after that, Mythic Uldir opens, and from that point on,
makes sense.
It's the full end game, and everything's available. Warforging and Titan Forging is open on non-Azerite pieces. Remember, no Titan Forging on weapons, and things will play out like they did in Legion.
Cool. A question here from Squishy, who said, how exactly does the Ketchup mechanic for the Heart of Azeroth work? Each week reduces the amount of AP needed by how much?
So there is a background knowledge mechanism that is not fully it's not in effect on beta yet, but will likely be before the end of beta, that works in the background just like knowledge does and has towards the end of Legion, except whereas knowledge multiplied your artifact power gains every week, I think it was something like times 1.3 that just kind of compounded exponentially. Here we're dividing it. And I believe it's a similar 30% reduction. That may be tweaked. It's something in that 25 to 30% range. So again, the idea here is if the next level of my Heart of Azeroth requires 15,000 artifact power, if I do nothing next week, that number might be down
the stream,
to
guys, if you haven't already.
11,000, 10,500 or something, which means that is the effective catch-up mechanic. So if I'm coming to the expansion much later on, I will be able to get those first few levels much faster. If somebody plays twice as much as me, the end result is there'll probably be a couple of 2-3 artifact levels ahead of me. They won't be double my artifact level.
There's not going to be a third faction.
That people with different amounts of playtime aren't drifting farther and farther apart over the course of the expansion. The reason why we're doing it this way as opposed to Legion is, frankly, when you're looking at trillions of AP needed, and you're opening your chest and you're like, oh sweet, this is like something billion AP item. That's pretty silly. Those are silly numbers. It's weird when you hit max level for the first time, leveling in Legion, and you go from getting like 100
Nicholas
AP
and,
from quest reward
Lauren.
to 1.6 billion.
Yeah.
This lets us actually keep the numbers in a consistent range, so you can actually compare them and think about what you're getting in a more predictable way. Doing a world quest will give you 150 or 200, and killing a raid boss might give you a few hundred. And that's how it will stay throughout the whole expansion. And so when you see a source of Azerite, an artifact power, you'll be able to actually parse what that really means to you. Whereas right now, I think people vaguely understand. Like, I guess a billion is a lot, but who knows how that even compared to what you were getting from, doing Suramar quests back in the day. It's not even possible to really make an apples-to-apples comparison anymore.
It also means that there's never a point where it's actually the wrong time to earn artifact power, the wrong time to go through a quest.
Yes.
Like, I know a lot of people would maybe do the Suramar quest chain on their main just to unlock everything, and then on alts be like, no, I'm going to save that for when artifact knowledge is ramped up a whole bunch because it's worth so much artifact power. I know that's what I did. I ended up leveling a lot of alts through that later just as a great way to catch up on artifact power.
I mean, technically those quests would still be more efficient in that they would still they'll get you more artifact levels if you hold off on doing them, but in practice, it's a drop in the bucket in the grand scheme of things.
No,
all
sure.
The AP that's available from other sources, but I think the main desire here is just to keep the numbers a bit more comprehensible, and also this is all possible because the Heart of Azeroth is a single artifact that works for all of your specs. You don't have to carry a bunch of items around and decide which artifact you want to apply the AP to. You're just leveling up your neck. When you loot it, it's instantly applied to your neck. So there's less inventory management. That also means that we can do this. If we tried to do this in Legion, you would have just hoarded your artifact power items and had them become more valuable with each passing week, and that would have been not good.
It's so good.
All right. Next question from Ughash, who's asking, can you expand on how loot will be distributed from PvP in Battle for Azeroth?
I think it's going to be the same.
I know we've talked about this a bit in the past. I remember it coming up at the press event that we had a while ago.
Weekly crates.
But it kind of feels like people still don't really know what's going on there.
Sure. So, for loot in Battle for Azeroth for PvP, we're looking to complement the sort of random-ish end-of-match rewards that we had in Legion with something that's much more deterministic and reflects how conquest vendors used to work back in the day, where you'd earn conquest, and there were vendors with a series of requirements on once you've earned this many conquest points this season, you can buy this item. People would naturally just kind of cobble together their sets in a predictable way over the course of the season. We know that relying completely on randomness can be very frustrating. And with gear mattering once again in PvP, we want to make sure that people who are just focused on PvP as their preferred playstyle have a reliable path to the gear that they want. So there's 3 parallel systems that award loot in rated PvP and PvP in general. So first off,
War mode,
just like before, at the end of a match, you'll have a chance to get an item. You finish an arena match, and you'll have a chance to get an item just like you did before, similar to sort of the end-of-run Mythic Plus rewards. The quality of the item will be based and proportional to your rating and your ranking. So whether you're in the Duelist tier or the Gladiator tier or the Challenger tier, that will affect the quality of the rewards that you're seeing.
Rated, yeah.
Now, in parallel to that, when you win rated PvP matches or you do your first Battleground of the day, your first Epic Battleground of the day, you'll be earning conquest points, filling a bar at the top of your PvP UI. And when you fill that bar, you will receive a fixed reward that is, a raid quality piece of armor or weapon that is part of a sequence of rewards. So week 1, you might get, I think actually week 1, it's like a raid finder quality weapon. That's like, this is your introduction to the system. If you don't have a good weapon, get this. And then in subsequent weeks, as you earn your conquest for the week, you will get a raid quality Azerite helm, a pair of boots, a pair of gloves, raid quality Azerite shoulders, etc., until you have all of those pieces, and then the cycle repeats with the next tier up of loot. And so if you fall behind, if you miss a few weeks, you come to the season late, there are catch-up mechanisms in place to let you earn these rewards more rapidly to get caught up to where other players are if they've been doing conquest for longer than you. This is the guaranteed baseline of rewards. If you invest time and dedication to the system, you will receive this full set of PvP gear over the course of the season, just like you always were able to. Obviously you'll earn conquest more rapidly if you're doing it at a high rank, but that's kind of the baseline guaranteed, regardless of what your rating is, as long as you're active, as long as you invest in the system. Then the final piece, and we really looked at the Mythic Plus system as a very successful method of gear delivery that complements rating and other
It sounded like he said rated, but I think he did mention
end of
normal
match
ones
rewards
afterwards.
are like your end of run Mythic Plus reward. We also have, when you fill up a conquest bar for the week, you will earn a weekly one-time reward that will be available from a chest that you can go loot near the Duelers Guild
Twitch
in the New World, and that has a higher tier piece, one per week, that is, again, proportional to your rating and to your ranking, and that will be based on the highest bracket that you had at least one win in. So obviously, you know, if you hypothetically get carried to Gladiator, if you want to keep getting those Gladiator rewards, you need to actually win matches in the Gladiator tier to be rewarded accordingly. And you know, those at the very high end will be on par with Mythic raid gear. It's just like, you know, you did a Mythic 10, you did a Mythic 15, you open your weekly chest there. This will be the PvP equivalent of that.
Awesome.
So 3 systems, random end of match rewards, fixed conquest schedule over the course of the season, and powerful weekly rewards based on your skill and rating.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. Next question here might have to be our last question, coming in from Recros, who says, how long will PvP seasons last in BFA? Will they be similar in length to Legion, or will they go back to corresponding with raid tiers like in previous expansions?
Probably go with raid
tiers. I think we're thinking a bit longer than Legion and trying to parallel our raid tiers and the other structure a bit more. I think the reward schedule that we have planned out certainly can span that longer tier. As much as possible, we'd like for our reward systems to parallel each other, since, you know, that's just sort of how the game as a whole works. We know that if we're giving out, if a new raid has opened and we're giving out better raid gear from there, PvP needs to remain competitive. Mythic dungeons need to remain competitive, and it's much cleaner if we can keep those systems moving in parallel. Versus, I think one of the challenges we often had in Legion, where we tried to fit 2 PvP seasons into a single raid tier, was that for the first of those seasons, very often, PvP gear would just feel weak. Like, if you're looking around at the gear that high-end raiders had, it just wasn't as good as what you had, because we had to leave room for this whole second season within the tier. The alternative would be... Not
really anything new from that Q&A, really.
In, like, 7.15, 7.2, towards the end of Nighthold, there was a period where the PvP gear was actually just strictly better than the raid gear, and people could get end-of-match rewards that were better than Mythic Nighthold gear, which also led to something that felt skewed in the opposite direction. The more we can keep all of those endgame systems moving in parallel, I think the more balanced and cohesive the endgame reward system will be.
Cool. And we're doing like an end of Legion post season as well, right? That's coming in here.
Yeah, so that's the other thought. We have the ability to, you know, we want to be able to end PvP seasons with a bit more flexibility. We want to be able to announce them a bit further in advance without necessarily giving away a patch date or having to tie ourselves to the fact that the season has to end at a certain time. If the patch ends up getting delayed a couple of weeks, no big deal. We have a state that's basically we think of as a post season, where you're no longer earning conquest. Your rating for that season was locked in for the determination of any final rewards or achievements you're going to get. But you can continue to play. You can earn end-of-match rewards, and there's an active ability to queue. And we're going to start off the 8.0 pre-expansion period with what effectively will be the Legion post-season. So we'll be in that state. You can get some, you know, good catch-up gear to help power you along as you look ahead to BFA leveling,
gear is the same as the
try out
gear,
PvP
so
and give us feedback and see how the new system works.
At least
cool. So you're queuing against other players with a similar rating as you, unlike a skirmish, which is just kind of random.
Exactly. I mean, this would just be your rating and MMR and all that would be preserved from what they were at the end of 7.35, the current Legion season. You're still level 110. It's just a post-season continuation.
Cool.
And yeah.
All right. Well, that is just about all the time that we have here. So thank you so much, Ian, for coming on here and answering these questions.
Yeah, thanks everybody for the awesome questions. I think a lot of able to get a lot of information out, and just really excited to see more people jumping into PTR now that it's open to the whole world. If you want to go check out changes to your class, new UI, war mode, just jump in. Eager to hear what everybody has to say, and we're listening for your feedback.
Yep.
So thank you.
And if you have beta access, we're going to be doing a Play with the Blues in Warfronts tomorrow as well. We're going to be using the communities feature to help put that together as well. So keep an eye out. We're going to have
definitely.
We made a sort of a small announcement about it yesterday, but we're going to have some more information coming today on how you can get involved with that. So if you do have beta access, keep an eye out for that. If you don't, definitely check out the 8.0 PTR and give us feedback on what you're experiencing there. So yeah, that's going to wrap us up. Thanks again, everybody, for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Until next time.
All right. Well, what do we say? What do we say about that? So, I mean, the big news, I guess, was the transmog thing sounded pretty cool, where you can, so say if you've got like a two-hander on your druid and you used a transmog, you get the two, well, I think it's daggers or something you have as an artifact. That one looked pretty cool. Anything else? Any other thoughts on it? Honestly, that was pretty much it for me. There was some PvP stuff, which was okay, I guess. When's raid testing started? It's in a bit. I don't know when normal's going to open, though. They might open normal after the heroic testing, so I probably won't be able to do it tonight, but I'm not sure. The transmog thing sounds cool, yeah, I agree. No lore questions. It was a pretty boring Q&A. Yeah, it wasn't... I mean, they didn't really say much. Obviously, the PTR is now upped, guys, so if you do want to do your class changes, your stuff like that, you want to see all the BFA changes to your classes, and you also want to look at the communities feature, you want to look at straight back orcs, that is all on the PTR right now, so if you go and download that you don't need a flag on your account or anything like that for that, so literally just download the PTR and away you go, and you can play, see what your orc look like as upright, potentially, and yeah, I mean, anything else, any closing thoughts? To be honest, yeah, a bit of a Q&A. That was it. That was the first time I've ever done a reaction of sorts, just kind of listening in and stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And yeah, let's... I think we're going to end it there. Do you need a sub to play TTR? No, you don't need a sub to play on the PTR. That is completely fine. Any other questions, I guess, for me? I guess if you want to... Like, I could probably maybe fill you in on something you might not be sure about. The Mythic stuff, yeah, the Mythic Plus stuff was really cool. Yeah, I did enjoy that. But beyond that, I mean, can we still get PvP artifact skins after BFA launches? I don't think so. I don't think so. It was great. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it was enjoyable. Brilliant. Well, we'll do it. We'll do it again. We'll have to do it again, won't we? So guys, thank you so much for joining me on this one. We might be back later on doing some. How tight is your busy? I don't know what the hell the busy is, but I'm sure it's a really funny joke. Does VTR show how we get Warfront gear? No, nothing on the Warfront gear. But yeah, that's pretty much it. There's no date on the PTR on the live 8.0, but it's probably going to be around July, probably July 10th potentially. But at the moment we are unsure. So guys, thank you so much for watching today. It's yeah, been fun. I might come on later again for raid testing. We'll see how it's going. But yeah, guys, thank you so much, and subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video if you haven't already. And yeah, take it easy.